In the heart of the nation where laughter's the key, Natch has the podcast, join the revelry, taking the Mickey with positive spin. Country folks unite, let the Nat Chat begin. Nat Chat where the laughter's free, spinning tales about politics with positivity.
Love that theme song. That's Micah Harrington, who was runner-up on The Voice, I believe. But we'll be chatting to him next week at the National State Conference, which is exciting. But right now, we're at Parliament, and I have Shadow Minister for Roads and Road Safety, Danny O'Brien. How are you?
I'm very well, and I can't sing as well as Micah, that's for sure.
Can you sing at all?
Not well, but like people who can't, I love to.
I bet you do. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Well, I've heard, this is not really my karaoke song, but I've heard that My Way in the Philippines, people have been murdered for doing it badly, and I don't mean to make light of that, but it scares me a bit whenever the idea of karaoke comes up, having heard that story. So, but My Way's a great one. I do love it, but no way could I carry it off.
And probably not in the Philippines.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, maybe don't. It's been all about budget this week and budget responses, and we were hoping for, and we spoke about this on your recent trip to Mildura, we were hoping for a significant increase to the roads maintenance budget in particular because, as we say in the great far northwest of the state, we don't drive on the left side of the road anymore. We drive on what's left of the road.
Yes, that's true. And probably the most thing I've heard mostly from people in Victoria the last couple of years is you have to have your car has to be roadworthy, but the roads don't have to be car-worthy, and that's a great frustration. Look, we did get a notional or a nominal increase in the roads maintenance budget this year. It's up to $680 million from a low of $441 million, but still, to my mind, nowhere near enough. And in the context of what the budget papers themselves say, it has been 22% inflation in the construction industry in the last 3 years, so since 2021. So when you sort of factor in those additional costs, that's not really much more money. So it's still certainly not enough given what's happened in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I'm not a numbers person. In fact, I will avoid numbers at all costs if I can. But even in my mind, if the inflation costs have gone up that much, that doesn't sound like much of an increase at all.
No, it's not. And it's the context that it's in too. What the other thing that's in the budget papers that's really alarming is that one of the performance measures, and this sounds like wonky budget gobbledygook, I understand that, but the performance measure is basically what's the government done with the money? Has it actually achieved anything? And one of the performance measures for roads is the area, the square meterage of roads that have been resurfaced or rehabilitated. And the target for that a couple of years ago was 12 million square kilometres in regional Victoria. 12 million square metres in regional Victoria. They only got 9 million last year, so they missed their target by 25%. This year just gone, or the year that we're currently in, they're expecting 340,000.
What?
Yes. So from 9 million, from a target of 12 million, they got 9 million last year. This year they're doing 340,000. And that's consistent with what we've been told by the road building industry, particularly the spray seal contractors, that there's literally been zero contracts this year for spray sealing. Now, why is that important? Again, a bit wonky here, but on average, and we got this out of the department secretary last year as well, you want to do about 8% of the network every year in spray sealing. That's putting fresh bitumen, fresh stones over the top to seal the road, stop the water getting in and creating potholes and damage. Literally none of that was done last year, and that's the problem.
So the minister talks about the floods of 21-22 and how that caused damage. Could a lot of that damage have been avoided if the sealing program was actually doing its job?
Yeah, to a degree, and we certainly, I've got a question on notice that I got an answer to just a week or so ago that indicates that that 8% that I talked about that should be done certainly hasn't been done the last few years, and indeed it's been progressing downwards until this year where there's virtually none. No question the floods cause cause an issue, no matter how good your road and your seal is. But the government is talking as though we've never had floods before. You know, we're getting responses from the government saying that unprecedented level of rainfall and floods, which is just rubbish. I mean, we had floods that were worse than we've had the last couple of years back in 2010, as recently as 2011. And certainly prior to that, we've had wet years, no question. So the wet seasons haven't helped. That's not in question. But the real problem is the lack of funding and the lack of work that's being done.
And we can see that, and you'd be very familiar, having been in Mildura recently, we can see the work that New South Wales do literally within 5 minutes. And when there's a pothole, even in the far west of New South Wales, which are really, you know, considering they're run out of Sydney essentially, they really are like District 12 all the way out there in outback New South Wales. But even their potholes get filled almost as soon as they occur.
Well, and some of the feedback I've had the last couple of weeks has been very consistent. I think it was on 3AW too. After Gather Round in Adelaide, the amount of Victorians ringing up 3AW and contacting me as well and saying, oh my God, I went to the footy in Adelaide and I can't believe how bad our roads are compared to South Australia. And that's one of the tricks, I guess, for us is that we get used to what's there and you don't actually realise how bad they've got to some degree. But you know, the data is there. It's not just for me to say it, but we got hold of the government's own survey of the roads, and they did about 8,400 kilometres of the network, which is about a third of the network, and found that 91% of the roads were poor or very poor. Literally not a single stretch of road was classified as good or very good condition, which tells the story.
Well, I mean, I've got people, and you would have too, contacting your office all the time, telling stories about how they've cracked rims. And honestly, and I said this to the member for Morwell yesterday, why anyone, honestly, in regional and rural Victoria would be driving low-profile wheels on a sedan these days? Because you need SUVs to get around on these regional roads now. You just do.
Yeah, and that's just become a real issue. Again, we got some answers, some data on questions on notice that showed there'd been a 414% increase in the number of claims that people put forward. Yeah, exactly, for damage caused by the roads. Now, out of those, and I think it was the figures started at, don't quote me on these, but vaguely it was 250 in the first year and up to 1,400 in the third year, so the last year that we had the data. And, of course, of those, literally one of them had qualified because there's a very high threshold. You have to be over about $1,500 damage before Vic Roads will consider paying for it. And my issue on that is that not necessarily that they should be compensating people, but they should be fixing the bloody roads in the first place.
Exactly. It shouldn't be the roads causing that kind of damage. And you know what? $1,500 for some of these wheels that I've seen, that's one rim.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot of people feeling that pain around. And it's not just that. The number of, and your constituents will know too, the number of roads where the speed limit's been reduced, and not just by a rough surface ahead yellow sign on the side of the road, but by a permanent
signs,
permanent 60 or 80 sign in a 100 or 110 location, not because it's dangerous or bendy or windy but because the road surface is so bad. And we got some data from the last budget hearings on that there were 480 odd of those locations across the state, across regional Victoria, and another 60 odd in Melbourne. This is something that sadly many of us country people are fairly used to, our roads not being great, but it's actually so bad now that even the metro roads, including some of the freeways, are in pretty ordinary condition. Which is
the fact that we get used to this as country people is sad in and of itself. But what are we going to? How can we tackle this? I mean, apart from, because you do need money to pour into this, you can't. There's no two ways about it. But how do we get to this point, and what are we going to do about it?
Well, we took to the last election a commitment of $10 billion over 10 years for the road maintenance budget. For your listeners, putting that in context, $441 million last year. So we were talking of upping it to $1 billion.
Yeah.
You'd have to build that up over a little bit of time to let the contractors catch up with equipment and machinery and the like. But that's part of it. But I think there's a lot more to it than just money. I think we've got to do a lot better in what we're doing. And some of that is really basic stuff that sometimes it's so basic you feel like you're gaslighting yourself when you ask about it. And I get this all the time from constituents and people contacting me, grading the roadsides.
Yeah.
Cleaning out the table drains.
Yeah.
Simple stuff that stops the water from seeping into under the road and causing those potholes and cracking and rutting and all those issues. We've got to get better at doing that. And I think that's become unpopular for whatever reason within Vic Roads and the department. B, a lot more difficult because of all the roadside barriers that have been put in. That's certainly become a problem, to the extent that, again, we asked the government, how many roadsides were graded last year. They gave me an answer of 24,000 linear metres.
What?
You're not good with numbers,
No.
Jade, but even you will know that's only 24 Ks.
That's 24 Ks.
Yep.
That's
and I'm not sure
insane.
whether that was both sides, so it might have only been 12. But if we're not grading the roadsides when they're not sealed, if we're not cleaning out table drains, then the water backs up. It doesn't matter whether you got floods or not. The water's going to sit around, and that is what is the enemy of good roads. Is water, and so you got to do some of that basics and make sure that yes, you put more money in, but you actually do some of that preventative maintenance as well.
Gosh, it's just, you're right. Some of this stuff, and it's not just roads, but some of it seems so simple. You're right. You're just like, why is common sense not prevailing here? Even with, and I've been out with myself, by myself with a tape measure, measuring the drop-offs on the side of the road, which could be, if you just maintained the shoulders or the lack thereof now. And we've got, visibility issues with shrubbery and, the non-maintenance of roadside veg.
Yep.
All this stuff is pretty simple.
Well, simple, costly sometimes. I mean, and this is, again, not that we're opposed to the roadside barriers. We certainly have concerns about where they've been put in some locations in the last 5 or 6 years, because we think they've probably been put in areas they didn't need to be installed. But the issue is you've got now, and certainly in Gippsland, Tim Bull and myself had issues with Bully's actually had trees growing up in the middle of the road, like in the middle barrier.
Oh, my God.
I had some at Flynn on the Princess Highway between Traralgon and Rosedale, where there was just a whole row of trees, including some that were 2 or 3 metres high, several inches across in diameter. Funnily enough, after we got that story in the Weekly Times and both raised it on social media, a couple of weeks later they got cut down.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah.
Really? What, going to the media got you some results?
I'd love it if the government actually responded every time we raised something. But they're the sort of things. Other parts of the Princess Highway that I travel up and down to Parliament all the time, where there's English broom coming through the steel barriers, and it's been poisoned, but it's still there, and it's still causing a visual blockage. And so some of those issues, that's about the maintenance budget. The budget's not there to do that basic maintenance, and that's harming not only our road surface but also the safety issues as well.
Yeah, but again, it's basic maintenance. Surely a return to basics in a lot of instances would be preferred.
Well, and a lot of people say, it's not like we need to go back to the good old days of the Country Roads Board or something like that. And it does, I feel old sometimes when I think about saying that sort of stuff. Not Country Roads Boards, long before my time. I
was going to say, really?
Yeah, I'm not that old.
You're on a board, were you?
But the reality is, we have forgotten some of the things that are basic that need to be done with our roads, and we've got to get back to doing them. Some of that's money, but some of it's just ensuring it's done. Yeah,
just basic maintenance. We have to get back up to the chamber because we're about to divide on some of these taxation bills we'll get to later, but I am going to take this gear to state conference next week. What are some of the things that you've got PAEC next week?
I do, yes,
yeah.
yes.
Now, PAEC, for those that are not across...
Oh, who could not be across PAEC?
I know, right? This is...
PAEC is the Public Accounts and Estimates Committee, and for my sins, I've now been on it for 10 years, or this is my 10th year.
What did you do?
I don't know. I think I upset someone
clearly
somewhere on the line. But no, jokes aside, it's actually a great committee. It's the committee that really holds the government to account, and what we've got starting tomorrow actually is the budget estimates process. So this is really the only time outside of question time that members of Parliament get to quiz the ministers about their portfolios, including the Treasurer, including the Premier, and it's notionally about the budget, and it is mostly about the budget, but it does that. The budget covers pretty much everything that the government does. And also we get to quiz the public servants. So it's about holding the executive to account as well. And it's a deeply frustrating process because we're limited by time and we've got Labor members on the committee running interference all the time and everything, but it's actually a really important part of the accountability process for democracy. And I do love it. It's very time consuming.
You're a weird one.
It's very frustrating. I'm a weird one. But look, it's important. It's as I said, really the only time you get to grill a minister on what's going on.
Yeah.
And I know even just from some of the conversations around the place this week that the ministers and their staff are all always nervous ahead of PAEC, and that's how they should be.
Well, I was going to say so they should be. All right, well, we might catch up with you after. How long do the PAEC hearings go for?
About 17 years. They used to be a straight 2 weeks, 9 to 5.
I was going to say, I thought they were 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the government's doing their best to, they hide some of the weaker ministers late at night or on a Friday afternoon, that sort of stuff. So we're now sitting sort of 8:30 till 7:30 some nights, which makes for very long and very tiring days. And we can get pretty cranky after being
cranky?
cooped up in a room.
Stop it.
But, so we've got basically 2 days this week, all of next week, and then another day after that to cover the 63 portfolios I think there are to go through, and we literally go through every one of them and try and hold them to account on what they're doing.
Well, may the odds be ever in your favour.
The force will need to be with me, Jade.
It will. Thank you very much for having a chat.
It's a pleasure.
Well, after a week of me not putting out that last little chat with the member for Gippsland South, he's back after a week at PAEC. How are you?
Oh, look, I'm just rapt to be here.
Are you mentally drained?
Yeah, I've got to say a little bit.
Yeah.
It's pretty full on. People wouldn't understand or probably care, to be honest, Ms. Benham. But
Ms. Benham, wow, that's formal.
We do 61 portfolios in 54 hours of hearings, and while a lot of that is taken up by mindless, boring, numbing government dixes to the ministers, where the ministers just sprout off, you have to do a lot of preparation to understand the issues that you're about to ask questions about, that our colleagues help with and provide questions for us on. And then, be across it a bit to listen to the answers and pivot accordingly and try and keep the pressure on the government to actually be transparent and tell us what's happening with the budget.
Yeah, but they don't really. And this is where, we've had it on, and I don't spend a huge amount of time in the office because I'm usually out doing other things, but we do have it on and the staff watch. And they get annoyed enough during question time when questions don't get answered. And a couple of them have said, this is just as bad. They'll take every question on notice or they don't answer. And
Yeah, it's frustrating. Or they give what the speaker might normally declare as a relevant answer. I've asked you about the Murray-Darling Basin Plan and you're talking about H2O. That's relevant somehow. And so that's very frustrating. But I think over the years, we've got a bit better at honing the questions to a much more succinct point, so trying not to let them waffle. And certainly there are certain ministers you can bring back, and there are some that'll just keep talking over the top of you and waste your time. And
well, because they only get a certain amount of time, don't they? So filibustering is a thing in PAEC.
Well, it's particularly a thing for us because, we are time limited for most of probably for the majority of the portfolios, actually. Certainly the smaller ones, if I can put them that way, in both the financial sense and in probably importance, we get 8 minutes.
8 minutes?
Literally 8 minutes. And people might not even appreciate that, but 8 minutes is not very long.
It's not long. No, not at all.
So, you're really going to get to maybe 3 questions out of that. If you can rapid fire a few, some public servants are better than others. And you can sometimes ask the public servants because they're more likely to perhaps give you particularly if it's a factual or a data question, you can get a bit more. But 8 minutes and some you get an hour. That if there's an hour for a particular portfolio, so I think police was actually an hour.
Yeah.
We get 3 lots of 7 minutes, so we get 21 minutes.
Wow,
not much.
How lucky! I admire your resolve then, as Darren Chester walked behind you and gave you a tickle behind the ear, and you barely gave a bit of flinch.
As I do most of the time, I just ignored him.
Oh, funny. So we are at state conference this weekend in Bendigo, which is was actually not too far away from me, which is a bit of a change. I would love to bring state conference to Mildura, perhaps. Do you think that's a possibility?
It's been a little while, actually. I was only just looking in our conference booklet. We had the list of where conference has been held, and it's been a while since we've been to Mildura.
Yeah.
And look, it's. I think we, generally speaking, try and hold it somewhere relatively central to all those people from Gippsland, from the southwest, and from your neck of the woods. But it tends to mean that most
Mildura is central, Central Australia, almost.
And Mildura is a beautiful city, and in fact, I can think of nothing better than going there in late May.
That's right,
because the weather will be nice,
stunning.
Yeah, but so I think it's time. I'd be happy to support a future conference in Mildura.
Terrific, excellent. Glad to hear it. Let's go back to PAEC after a little bit of a diversion. Highlights from this week, because you do see, I love Twitter. I refuse to call it X. That's a whole other conversation for another time.
Yep.
But I follow it on Twitter when I'm out on the road and doing other things out of the office. And the state politics journos clearly love it. And you see all sorts of little, tweeted highlights throughout the week. What's been the highlights and the lowlights of PAEC this week that the common man might also find a highlight or a lowlight?
Well, there's a couple that probably it's not the common man because I'm way too close to it, Jade.
I was going to say.
On the
also, are you out of touch with the common man?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to PAEC, definitely. I'm the nerdiest of nerds when it comes to PAEC.
Just
in fact,
PAEC?
I steady. In fact, speaking of that, I in fact did get on the record call the Minister for Transport Infrastructure a nerd because as he does, he went back to something from 100 years ago and quoted some obscure economist or something. But and he invited it. He actually invited it. He said the member for Gippsland South will have a go at me, and I called out nerd. But there are highlights and lowlights. I think a couple of amusing ones. We asked the Minister for Energy what she was doing to shore up our gas supplies, which we'd had a report, in fact, a brief that had gone to her that showed that we're in strife in a couple of years' time. And she started listing a whole lot of projects, including those by Esso in my electorate. And I said, well, that's Esso's project. They're not yours. And she looked at me and said, what, do you want us to go into gas production now? And I'm like, this is the government that's restarting the SEC to go into electricity production. So really, what's the difference?
Yeah,
So it was
exactly.
just, and I think as she said it, she realised the irony of what she was saying, that, how ridiculous, as if we're going to go into gas production, Mr. O'Brien. Well, you're going into electricity production, so... Anyway, that was one. When we were quizzing the police portfolio about a new enterprise deal and where the Chief Commissioner has said it could cost $3 billion, and one of the government members took a point of order about the line of questioning on the enterprise agreement and said, I'm not sure how this is relevant to the budget. To which I pointed out, the Chief Commissioner's just said it might cost $3 billion. I think that's fairly important.
I was going to say, I think that's pretty relevant.
So that was a bit of fun. But look,
Your definition of fun and my definition of fun are really different.
Well, it's not often in politics and in Parliament. We talk about debate, don't we? But we don't really debate. Someone speaks for 10 minutes and the next person speaks for 10 minutes.
Correct, it's not actual debate.
Whereas in PAEC, you actually do get that opportunity for a bit of interjection and a bit of commentary to each other, and so that was one. Sometimes the government, desperately trying to shield their ministers from questioning, will say silly things like that. What's this got to do with the budget? A potential $3 billion cost.
Correct.
It's sort of important.
Yeah, I know they don't actually know how much $3 billion is.
We have heard the Premier say, with respect to the alleged blowout in the cost of the Commonwealth Games, $1 billion, neither here nor there.
No, well, it's 1,000 million.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
That's a lot.
I'd be upset if I misplaced it.
Well, it's a bit much to lose behind the couch cushion, isn't it?
Exactly. But it was an interesting week or so. We've still got one session to go on Monday morning, but the government's clearly struggling because just about every portfolio we were highlighting budget cuts in the budget papers. Issues that they've not gone ahead with, so things that they've had to cancel. And again, you accept the government has a mandate, and they claim repeatedly that, we've taken suburban rail loop to 2 elections, so we're going ahead with it because the people voted for it. Well, the people also voted for the $6 billion Arden precinct redevelopment that the previous premier committed before the last election, and that's now been dumped.
Yeah.
So, you can't have it both ways. Now, yet things change. You've got to cut your cloth to suit the table and all those sort of things, but I think the government is struggling a bit now because they've made such a mess that Labor can't manage money, and Victorians are paying the price.
Yeah, you got that. That's well done. Well done. I wish I had applause on my little sound effects panel here. I don't think I have.
I can do it for you.
Yeah. Well done. That was great. And you got that 12 times in one single debate last week. Well done.
That's because it's true, Jade.
It is true.
Labor can't manage money, and we just keep seeing it. It's taken a long time for the chickens to come home to roost, so to speak, with the budget, and particularly with people of Victoria starting to see it. But now, when we're literally seeing programs cut,
in Labor electorates too.
Yeah. Projects not going ahead, projects being delayed. That's because Labor can't manage money, and we're all paying the price.
Yeah, we are.
Did you hear? I just got it in again.
Yeah, you did. You got it in again. Yeah, okay. I haven't really prepared my sound effects bell very well at all. Otherwise, I'd give you a ding. There was something else I wanted to bring up with you, and it's completely just slipped my mind because I got sidetracked by sound effects. Oh, no, that's what I was going to say. When we talk about, you said before they've made such a mess, and they have made such a mess. It seems to me that they are trying to tax their way out of this debt and the mess that they've made. But like we heard our leader, Peter Walsh, say before, governments can't tax their way out of things like this. And this is, to me, it seems like history repeating itself. Jacinta Allen is the modern day Joan Kerner.
Yep.
She would hate me saying that, and I've never seen our Premier in polka dots.
No.
And I can't wear polka dots to this day because of Joan Kerner. What's the solution here? Is it the private sector? Is it incentivising the private sector to solve things like the housing crisis?
As Peter Walsh said, tax is not the answer. No civilization has ever taxed their way to prosperity. And yes,
I like that.
Yeah.
Can I quote you on that? It sounds like
absolutely.
a good sticker.
I'm not sure it actually came from me, but it's the
Socrates.
reality. It's the reality. And look, we have to have taxes. We have to have taxes to fund our hospitals and police and nurses and teachers and roads and all of those things. But broadly speaking, when you continue to tax people, it removes their ability to live their lives as they see fit, and to innovate, and to be creative, and to be entrepreneurial. And it sends, particularly in a nation like ours, it sends capital outside of our state, and we're seeing that particularly in the property sector. As Peter Walsh said this morning, 55 new or increased taxes since Labor came to power, half of them are on property. And is it a surprise we've got a housing crunch, an affordability and availability crunch for people buying and renting? Because the investors are gone, so the supply is gone, and people can't afford. And even for those who have got, say, a rental, you put land tax up on the landlord. What do you think is going to happen?
Exactly. They get out. And I get real estate agents calling me weekly saying, and 6 months ago it was, oh, geez, we've got half a dozen properties a month coming off the rental market and going on to the sales market. Yep. Now they're calling me saying this is happening. We've got at least 6 to 10 per week. And that's 3 or 4 real estate agents in Mildura alone, where the rental stock is zero. And they're all going to, if they're not Airbnbs, and even if people are getting out of those now because of the land tax issue, but they're certainly not going to the long-term rental market because they've been taxed out of it.
And even those that are choosing not to sell, I'll give a good example, an email I got from someone in my electorate last year as well, but they've followed up again this year. They're a retired couple who are teachers. Pardon me. They put their money into property rather than their superannuation to fund their retirement. They've got single mums and pensioners, so they're tenants, and their bills, so they've got about four homes, I think. Their land tax bill in 2 years has gone from about $350 to $2,700.
I thought it was capped at $975.
No, because then there's because some of those properties weren't previously paying tax, so they're now getting whacked for the first time. Plus the valuations have gone up. plus the rates have gone up as well. So
what's the tax that's capped at $975?
it's not capped, it's just that it's a flat rate.
Ah.
So it's $975 plus the percentage figure on the value of your property. Oh. Yeah.
Wow.
From the value of $50,000 to $100,000, you'll pay $500. That's a flat rate, and I guess that's capped. But then from $100 to $300, you pay the $975, and I'm pretty sure you also pay the whatever the
percentages of your
rate. Yeah. If not, it's certainly above $300. You're paying all of the above. So, but anyway, so those people they don't want to sell. They certainly want to keep their properties, but they have to pass those costs on to their tenants.
Of course they do.
And that's something the government just doesn't seem to understand.
No, they don't, because people that own more than one property are obviously land barons and the devil. And
apparently.
Yeah.
Well, and the government likes to try and push that notion, but the fact is the data shows 70% of landlords, who are technically known as rental providers these days, own one property. And I think it's the vast majority of those are on less than average week annual earnings.
They're mum and dad investors.
Yeah, they're not rich people necessarily.
No, gosh, no. Well, I mean, the common sense answer is here, incentivise the private sector, particularly in the housing market.
Yep.
We might catch up with you again in the next couple of weeks to see what the washout is of PAEC, but thank you very much for giving me 5 minutes at State Conference. I know you really want to get back in there and debate some motions because
It's been a pleasure, Jade. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh,
whether it's for a podcast or in the car for a chat or whenever.
I love how as soon as I open a mic, people feel like they have to flatter me. It's not necessary, but it's very welcome.
I can do the opposite if you prefer.
No, that's fine. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Righto. Thank you, Danny. We'll talk to you again soon.
Cheers, Jade.
In the heart of the nation where laughter's the key, Natch has the podcast, join the revelry. Taking the Mickey with positive spin. Country folks unite, let the Nat Chat begin. Nat Chat where the laughter's free. Spinning tales about politics with positivity.
This podcast was recorded at the National State Conference. If you'd like to know more about becoming a member, then you can go to our website, vic.nationals.org.au.